The War of the Rohirrim is the first Lord of the Rings anime film produced by Peter Jackson, who is the ideal for Middle-earth cinema. But this movie has poor visuals and poor character arcs, even though the story is close to the lore. Tune in to the rest of this episode to hear what Nathan Danneker and I have to say about the War of the Rohirrim, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And with that, let's dive right in. Welcome, my lords, to the White City, where you will learn more about Middle-earth and discover differences and similarities between the Rings of Power show and Tolkien's books, and whether Amazon's show, episode by episode, is worth watching. I'm Philip Dutt, your host, and I'll be joined by Matt Vandervoort and Mark Schaefer. I hope you enjoy. Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in to the White City Podcast. During this intermission between Season 2 and Season 3 of The Rings of Power, you'll find us talking about different characters of Middle-earth and artifacts of Middle-earth, along with the Lord of the Rings trilogy movies and the War of the Rohirrim. If you want to listen to our Season 1 review, then go to the beginning of the podcast at any audio platform. Or if you want to listen to our Season 2 review, go to YouTube or an audio platform and search Season 2 review. There will also be new guests on the show with good amounts of Tolkien and lore expertise. So a lot of things to look forward to. Today I have back with me again, Nathan Danneker.
Thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. So we're going to be reviewing the War of the Rohirrim, which has been in long awaited. So I've been wanting to do it for a while, but so finally got to it.
Yes, I am the one who has been pushing Phil to do it. I did watch it in theaters. Phil has watched it out of theaters. So we have a little different perspectives because Phil knows my first impressions without spoiling, so he knew what to expect before I knew what to expect. So that may color our discussion slightly.
Yeah, for sure. So just to kind of set a stage for like the movie, can you just like give a run through of like kind of the events that happen through it?
Yeah, so this is covering stories about Rohan. This is before, this is about Helm Hammerhand, his sons, and his fight with the Dumbling Danes led by Freyka and Wolf in the different parts of the movie and the story. So Helm is the king. He's been the king for a while. He's pretty old at this point. And Freyka is a Dunling Dane lord who also might have some Rohirrim blood mixed in, Rohan blood mixed in. And he really wants to take over the throne. So in the story, in the appendix, he comes up with the plan to start getting himself into the royal family, to get his son Wolf married to Helm's daughter, who in the appendices is unnamed, but her name's Hera in the movie, so I'll go with Hera just to make it simple. Helm refuses, they insult each other, and then they go outside to have a brawl, basically, and Helm one-punch mans him, basically, and he dies in one hit. And then Wolf flees. Helm calls him and anyone who's following Wolf's and Freyka's family enemy of Rohan. They all flee, but they're all still like surrounding the. They're in the Dunling Dane area. They're in the outer border of Rohan and all that kind of stuff. 4 years pass, and they've been hard years. Crops have not been growing well. Animals aren't doing well. All the other stuff, and Wolf allies himself with some of the men of the East and some corsairs, and with that alliance and also the Dunling Danes, who he's naturally the chief of, they go and they attack Rohan, and while Rohan's really weak, Helm and his sons and his army try to defend themselves. They lose, Helm's older son, Hameth, I believe, or
I think his younger son is Hama.
Halma. Yeah. So the younger son is Halma. The older son, which I believe, I forget his name, but the older son dies in the battle. The younger son and Helm flee to the Hornburg. At that time, it's not called Helm's Deep yet because Helm was still a king and they didn't name it after him yet. So they fled to the Hornburg with whoever the survivors they have. They go up there. It's a hard winter. Wolf sieges him, but Wolf also, it's implied that he stays in Edoras, and Wolf sets him up as king of Rohan. So while they're under siege, Helm's younger son, Halma, goes out to try to relieve the siege, find supplies, etc., yada yada. In the books, it's not that clear if he dies to the Dunlendings or if he dies just to the weather, because during this weather, it's called the Long Winter, which is like freezing cold. It's miserable. It's just real bad. And so he dies when he goes out, him and his whole party. Helm is racked with grief, and he decides, well, the One Punch Man worked on Freyka. I'm going to go One Punch Man, basically the whole Dunlending army that's outside sieging. So he does that at night. He goes out and he beats up, lonely sentries and all the other stuff, puts the fear of this ghostly wraith in all of them. And then eventually one night he stays out too long in the cold and they find him frozen as a statue with a bunch of probably dead bodies around him and everything else. Meanwhile, the nephew of Helm gathers up the loyal Rohirrim, the ones who did not swear to Wolf or not Dunlendings or everything else. They manage an army, and then in the spring, they attack Edoras. They take down Wolf, kill him, and Freyarith, I think it's Freyarith? I forget what his name is, but
Yeah, I can't remember if it.
yeah.
What it is exactly, but it starts with an F.
Yeah, it does start with an F. As you can tell, I crammed session some lore with the wiki today, so my lore on this story was not that high, but so forgive me if I get everything wrong. So as you can tell, I'm not the lore expert that Mark or any of the other guests that Phil normally has on. So
well, it's all right.
And
Still figure it out.
And so he becomes king. There's no talk really about the what happens to the daughter that much. And then also the thing is, which is covered in the movie, is Saruman then comes in and says, "Hey, you need help? I hear you've just gone through a civil war and your whole army's been plagued by 4 years of famine and hard winter and all other stuff. I can protect you from Isengard." Because that was the other thing. The Dunlendings during the 4 years, during the years after, while Freyka and Wolf were in charge of the Dunlendings, they had taken over Isengard. The Rohirrim really didn't occupy it at all. I guess kind of just like left it alone. They took it over, so that was their kind of like their base in Rohan. So he was probably thinking, okay, good, I'll have this wizard who at this time, I'm assuming none of them knew of any of the wizards who had fallen or if any of them had fallen. So like, okay, this is good. We're having Saruman the White protect this bastion, which in our recent history was normally a bastion of rebels and evil. So, hey, I'll accept this. I need the help. I need all the allies I can get. So, and that's basically where the story ends. That's also kind of where the story ends for the movie. Obviously, the movie talks more about the daughter, which is not so much in the books. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the gist of the story in the appendix. So,
yeah. Right. So, okay, that's the gist of the story in the appendix. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I guess we could try to go through and talk about every single thing that's different, but I guess if we want to just we can start off talking about the main character.
Yes.
Hera. Mm-hmm. And obviously she's not in the main story or the original
Well, she's
story.
not. She is in the story, but she's not as prominent as she is in the movie.
True. Okay, so we don't know her name, and past the first in the appendix or whatever, past the first mention of her, and Wolf potentially marrying Helm's daughter, that's
Yeah, that's
Like
it.
she's not mentioned ever again
Nope.
in the story.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting is thinking about, I guess, why they would have picked her for the character, and also like from what I saw, and again like I saw a good part of it. You told me about it, so I think I kind of got the gist of like the feeling for the movie, and it seemed like that. I was like, hey, I like this more than Rings of Power, in my opinion. And of course, I had a couple of people tell me that it wasn't worth watching, and I still watched it, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know, this. I guess like I felt the way they like started out and all was all right.
Yeah. So what? So I guess we'll start with the main character. So Hera. The issue I have, the main issue I have with her is it just feels like. So this is very much for the animation style.
Okay.
So I'll start with that, which is kind of like we'll explain more of my thoughts about it. So when you watch the movie, everybody else is kind of like, darker, more natural tones. Even Helm, he's white, but is not like, like bright white, like a Gandalf figure from, not the Two Towers, when he shows up in Fangorn, he's like glowing like an angel. He's not anything like that. The Dunlingdings look very normal. Even the Easterlings and the Corsairs that they get, those are very normal. And even in the movie, like the two orcs and the troll that show up, they look like they would fit in Lord of the Rings. Hera is really, really, really bright. Even in scenes where it doesn't make sense for her to be like so radiant, which makes her stick out weirdly. Which is, it's just weird because like you'll see her walking through a crowd and you're like, oh yeah, she's the main character. I can just tell. Like, yeah, you don't even need to watch the movie. You can just show something. And if anybody's seen any like animated, like Japanese style animated movie, they can instantly say, oh yeah, that's the main character. You don't have to say what the story is, anything else. They just like, oh yeah, that's the main character, because they're just so. She is animated and drawn so much differently from everybody else that it's kind of jarring at times. And it kind of is similar in the story with, like in her story with this, because like it's still horrible for her, but like the worst things that happen to her is she loses both of her brothers and eventually a father. So she basically loses her whole family, which I still would say that is a tragedy of a character and everything else. But like she didn't really have much control over that. She like every time she tries to, every plan she concocts to work out eventually succeeds. Like she doesn't have really any failure besides losing her family, which is still a failure, but it's not really like a character failure. It's more just like bad things happen to her, which that's like her story arc. And so the other big thing that's different is, so she is the person that is in charge of people while they're in the siege in the Hornburg. Where in the appendix, it is not clear who it is. It might be Helm before he loses himself to grief and starts punching everybody. That's not a Rohan. So it's not clear in the books which one it is, but in the movie, it's very clear she is in charge. And I would wish that, because she is shown to be a free spirit, she is shown to be an adventurer and everything else, I would have preferred in the movie to show her struggling more with trying to figure out how to keep a siege. Because she can't she can't ride her horses like she used to. It's winter. She can't be free. She's stuck. And she kind of talks about, oh, I don't feel like I'm ready, but it's like a 2-minute conversation, and then she gets a pick me up from her
Shield Maiden Lady?
Shield Maiden Lady, yeah. Which she is cool. I do like her. And so she just kind of doesn't really have a character arc. Whereas like Helm definitely does. Helm has a character arc. He starts off proud and feeling like he's invincible, and eventually he gets beaten down, and he eventually sacrifices himself for his daughter. So in the siege, Helm does go out and start punching people as ghosts at night, like he does in the appendices. But on one of his adventures, his daughter follows him, and kind of follows him. He follows the trail, and then the secret entrance that they both figured out how to escape out of the Hornburg and get out collapses, and due to them fighting the orcs and the troll that we may talk about, but they're not that relevant. It's more of just like their fight blocks off the entrance, which basically that's the story. It's like that's what happens. And so they have to go back in through the front door, which has been locked this whole time because they've been under siege. So they basically run in front of the Dunlington army, and Helm sacrifices himself to make sure Hera lives. And that's the character arc of Helm. So I really enjoy Helm. He's good. I can't go off story of Hera, but like Hera just like, all of her plans work. She, when they have the initial battle of Edoras, she finds out the traitor noble. She figures it out. She gets him. They fight. I think she kills him. He like tries to jump on her, and she's on the ground. She stabs her with a pitchfork, I believe it was, or something like that.
Oh yeah.
So like that happens, and then she, knowing that Wolf wants to take Edoras, she sets off and burns down the city, so that he basically governs ruins. And during the siege, they never really show any of the people struggling, besides like they just look cold. So it's like, yeah, but also it's like, ironically enough, actually, it's like, it looks like from the siege, it actually looks like the Dunlingtons are suffering more than the people inside the Hornburg. Because not only are they also freezing, they're also being hunted by Helm. So they're terrified of going out at night. So it seems like of the two people in the siege, like both are miserable. I would not want to be in the Dunlington side, which would not make sense because the attackers should have this advantage. But so like they show a lot more of like Wolf and General, I forget what the general's name is, but his general buddy, them trying to keep their army together, make sure they doesn't run away, because they do not want to be there anymore. They're like, no. So
okay, so with Hera,
yes,
being like you're saying, like almost too perfect of a character without any flaws.
yes,
What's interesting is to think about, I think even a character like Aragorn in the Lord of the Rings books,
yes,
like has few flaws in a sense. And I think people would say that about him.
Yeah.
So
what I would say about him is, so like the thing with Aragorn is, at very least, so the thing I'll bring up is like, so Fellowship of the Ring, him trying to keep the party together fails. And even though he accepts that Frodo has to leave, first off, Boromir dies. And also at the same time, Pippin and Merry get captured. So like, he was fighting with all of his might and everything else, and he was trying to succeed, and he was doing his best, and it still failed. If that was Hera, she would one-man woman kill the whole army. So at least what it feels like. Like, I don't know, she would, the arrow would go to Boromir, and she'd magically shoot, throw out a shield, it would float in the air and just block everything. So I don't know.
I got you.
At least that's what it felt like in the movie. It felt like she could never fail. Whereas like Aragorn definitely had times where he fought with all of his might and it still didn't work. It felt like in this movie, it felt like whenever she put her whole effort into something, she always won.
Okay.
So I would also agree, like Aragorn is very like perfect. Like, he doesn't have very many character flaws. It was the same thing with Hera. But you don't see, like, you don't see her try her best and it still doesn't work. You never see that. Which is why I wish they had done that during the siege. Of, like, shown her, like, doing her best to feed her people, and it's still not working because they just don't have food. And, like, her trying to figure out, okay, I need to do something or whatever else. So yeah, so that's where I would put it in, of, like, you know, characters that are perfect and that are also the main characters and, like, the different ones. Because I feel like also, like, in the books, like, there's Tom Bombadil. He's obviously a perfect character. But he shows up very briefly. He's not the main focus. He's not everything else. So, and, like, also similar with Galadriel and showing up in the Fellowship or any of the, you know, Elrond when he shows up, like, they are paragons of what they do. But you don't focus on them. So, like, okay, they're a good character. They're a good ideal to look up to. We see them briefly, and then they're gone after the scene's end.
Right, because it's in more of the eyes,
Yeah.
arguably, of the hobbits.
Yes.
And in that sense, you could argue, okay, the hobbits are the ones who are, I don't know, like, more flawed in a sense, or they
Yes.
have more obstacles that they have to overcome.
Samwise is perfect, but, yeah, no.
Yeah, so we would relate more to the hobbits,
Yeah.
and I think that's the intent, than anybody else in the story.
Yeah.
At least in Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
Right. So, one more thing about Hera, I think, is something that maybe, like, maybe other people have talked about it, but it's, I don't want to just be making, like, comparisons to other, you know, media or whatever, but you have Galadriel,
Yes.
who very much seems to be, in Rings of Power, like, the main character, who I guess they almost do kind of a little bit of a flip on her character.
Yes.
Because they make her a little more flawed, I
In
guess.
season
than,
2, yes. Yeah.
Or at least I'm saying, as opposed to, like, I think a lore, like, the lore
Yeah.
would say that Galadriel would be more of this, hey, like, stick to what's good and not be affected by what's evil. But people having a problem with the fact that, like, she's portrayed to be this kick-butt woman. And I'm just interested in knowing, like, if that would be, like, the same thing that... Would you say that is a problem you have with, like, a woman being, like, oh, a strong woman who, like, overcomes everything and, like, just... I mean...
So what I will say is every good story has to have a conflict. You have to have... So I think every good story has a conflict where you have to believe the main character might fail. Even if they are kick butt. There is, so I'll bring up another one. So this is, his name is Christopher Paolini. He wrote the Aragorn, the Dragon series.
Yeah, the Aragorn books,
Yeah, the Aragorn books. So he wrote a sci-fi book with a very strong female character who, by the end, she does some crazy things. But there are many times throughout the story where you are convinced she might actually fail. I never get that with Hera. I never.
Right. Yeah.
And then, so that's the problem I have with Hera, is not that she's if instead of focusing on Hera and we focused on Halma and he had the same story of that, I'd also think Halma would be a bad character. I don't think it's gender-related. I just think it's how they wrote it. So,
yeah. So I think that what I'm thinking about is the fact that it's a woman in that role.
yeah, that's the problem. The problem is, especially in this current movie culture, there's been a lot of pushback against that, where it seems like certain movie studios, certain directors are scared of letting their female characters face struggles that they actually are struggles.
Okay.
that it seems like that one, and then when people push back against, hey, this character doesn't seem realistic because they're not really struggling, then people push back and saying, oh, you're only saying that because she's a woman. And it's like, some people might be doing that. I personally am not. Like, I personally think I would love Hera more if they showed her struggling during the siege. And they showed her struggling during the siege more. I would be like, okay, I get her. Like, she is an amazing warrior. She can do this. She can all do this. But when it comes to leading and standing still, she struggles. Because this is not what she is. She's a free spirit. That's what she shows. Like, she's out, in the beginning of the movie, she's out exploring, trying to tame an eagle, and everything else. And, like, her brothers and father are like, what are you doing? You're doing reckless things. And so, like, I would have loved of her to be, like, showing, like, that's her character arc of being like, I am now in something where I don't want to be. I am stuck in one place and I can't escape.
Yeah.
And so, but they don't really delve into that.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they did, that would have been good. Like, I mean, I think if I remember correctly, the only thing she really, like, talks about during the siege is she's scared of, like, she's wondering if her plan to confront Wolf will work. Like, but that's at the very end of the siege. Like, it's, yeah. So, yeah.
Well, another thing is interesting is that there are few female protagonists, I guess you'd say.
Yeah.
In Tolkien's books.
Yes, very few.
And, like, Eowyn is, like, a very... Okay, like, there's Eowyn and, like, Galadriel. I think Galadriel, you can definitely see as being, I guess, on her own. She kind of has a story on her own.
Yeah.
I think a lot of other female characters, like, throughout, especially the Silmarillion, that I'm thinking of, they have a story because of it's like a romantic relationship.
Yes.
To a certain degree. So what do you think of that? What do you think of the main protagonist as being a female, but
not wanting a connection with anyone?
Well, I guess my thing is that I could see there being an argument that, like, this isn't the way, like, Tolkien wouldn't have written, like, a female character to be doing all this in his story.
So I think it'll come back to, like, Eowyn. Like, she was a very strong independent spirit until she met Faramir. And
yes, that's true.
So, like, and obviously, actually, I think, and actually, even the beginning narration is by the Eowyn, the one who did that. So,
yeah,
like,
I think you're right.
it would make sense, like, if this was an actual story in Rohan, like, she would know the story of Hera and everything else, and, like, this is something she would look up to. But she still does most of her crazy stuff. Like, she kills the Witch King before she meets his Faramir. So, like, she does all of her crazy stuff. She gets, she brings Merry into the battle. She sneaks them in. Everything else, she does all that other stuff, and then, like in the movie, she's showing to, like, she's making sure the women and children are safe during the Two Towers battle, and so, like, they're showing, like, she is a capable person who's on her own and everything else, and then she gets hitched. But it's like, that's after she's done all of her epic stuff. So, like, you already know she does epic things. So it's like,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting part in the and we don't really have to talk more about Hera after this, but she says, I don't want to get married to anybody ever. So, and I guess the thing that kind of goes through my mind because of, like, thinking about how Galadriel is portrayed in Rings of Power is, like, okay, are they just trying to make this, like, female character who doesn't need family, and family being, like, is family an important part of Tolkien's
Yeah.
stories.
I mean, I think she needed. I think she needed, like, she does lose her brothers and her dad. Like, I think that's the reason why, just to finish it up, like, at the end of the movie, she leaves Rohan. And I think it's because I think if any of them had survived, which obviously, following the story, none of them survived the siege of the Hornburg, which is accurate. So in that case, yeah, she has nothing. She has nothing left to connect herself. Like, she respects her cousin, but she's not, like, beholden to him. So her leaving Rohan makes sense because it's like there's nothing really here for me. Mm-hmm. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I got you. Okay, well, let's talk about Helm and like his relationship with his sons.
yes,
And I think that, and because I didn't pick it up reading the appendices, but I think that Helm Hammerhand, I think he gets that name from like killing the chieftain
Freyka.
lord. Yeah, with one hit, right?
yes,
And then that's where he gets the name from.
yeah, and then it's also from where he goes out and he fights the Dullingdene army during the siege.
Yeah.
because he doesn't fight with a weapon, so he just overpowers them with his strength. So
Right. And as you were saying, I think it's he's got a better character arc, and I guess the obstacles that he has to confront are more grave to him than to like Hera,
yeah,
it seems. And I guess like they're in the movie, they're trying to play up Helm's relationship to Hera
yes,
as being a big part of his character arc.
yeah.
And I don't know that. Do you think that is needed, or do you think that like without Hera that he could still have a good character arc?
Yeah, I think so. Because, like, you could, I think very easily, like, so the situation, or like how in the movie they show that he has to fight until he freezes to death, is because his secret passage gets collapsed. So, like, you could just, like, show that and him being, like, just giving up all hope and, like, going out and basically doing the, was it the Fingolfin when he goes challenge Morgoth thing of like, fight me? So he goes out, and so that's how he dies. So like, and like that kind of like relieves the strain of that. And so, yeah, I really like Helm because he starts out an arrogant, very arrogant old man who's confident in himself because he's been the king for so long. And he is very powerful. And even after he kills Freyka and then they have the 4 hard years, he is still utterly confident that he can wipe away whatever Wolf brings against him. He is like, I got this, then nothing, we're good. And then he gets humbled. And he learns that, okay, the only thing I can do is I need to now protect, what's left. And so in order to do that, I need to not be so proud. I need to basically run like a one-man show. Basically, I can't lead armies anymore. I'm not in charge. I'm not the person in charge. I am basically becoming the Wraith. I'm becoming the Fear. I am there to try to force the Dullingdenes to stop the siege because of they're scared, which almost works. And so it's a good, I think it's a good character arc. And then him with the 2 sons, so the older brother, is it Helmath or what? I forget. You can check the book.
His sons.
So it's Helma is the younger son.
I thought it was Hama.
Oh, Hama, yeah.
Which is interesting because it's also the name of another lord of like Theodens.
Yeah, I mean, it
But-
would make sense. Like, you know, we name people after famous people all the time, so they would probably name it after princes of old and nobles of old. So the older son is just the heroic. He's basically the Boromir character, kind of. He's there to be heroic, do crazy stuff, and then die tragically. So, although reading, I am conflicted on how Halma dies, because in the appendices he dies during the siege when he's trying to go out and like he sends out a sortie with a party and he's trying to do the other stuff. In the movie, he dies, but he dies at the very start of the siege with Wolf executing him in front of all the people, like in front of the walls. And so, but both of them lead to Helm succumbing to grief and becoming, Hammerhand who punches everybody. So, I'm not sure which one I like better, because both are tragic. But yeah, both of them don't really have too much of a character arc. They're both kind of just there to be like, they're good guys. They're good brothers to Hera. It shows the good, they're good to her and everything else. So, yeah. But yeah, so do you have anything else on Helm you want to think?
Not really. I think no. I think what you said was good. I think that one thing I kind of whenever like Helm challenges, I mean, he basically challenges Freda or Fricka. Like it's, I don't know. I mean, I guess he doesn't know his own strength.
Yes.
But like, especially when I read it, I'm like, the guy kind of seems like he knows like what he's getting into, like, But anyway, so like, it doesn't really seem to me like there was necessarily a great cause to be brawling. But I mean, I guess it was just supposed to be a brawl and wasn't like he was supposed to die.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
but
they were two prideful old men that were having a spat.
Yeah.
And that's how they dealt with it. So,
right. So yeah, so the brothers, not really much of a story arc there. Supporting their father and their sister throughout the movie. I think that the cousin is cool.
Yes.
I wish, in a sense, he would have been in the story a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree.
But I can't remember from the appendices when I read it if he does separate. If Helm in the beginning does tell him like, hey, like, you're basically like banished, right? Because he does come back for the siege and he does help and that kind of, and ultimately helps.
It's very interesting.
Win,
so in the story, which this can kind of lead us into talking about Wolf, is in the appendices. It is implied that Wolf is defeated at Edoras, and that's where Freyloth kills him. Where in the movie, he dies to Hera in a one-on-one duel, while Freyloth is pulling a Gandalf and running down that hill. Gandalf and Aramir, I guess it would be, from the Two Towers. So, because it was good once, do it again.
Yes. So Freyloth attack So basically, Wolf was in Edoras during the siege.
Yes.
And then basically they won at Helm's Deep or at the Hornburg. And then Freyloth went to Edoras.
So it might be that or might be that, but it does sound like, where Wolf dies, where Wolf is finally defeated is at Edoras, not at Helm's Deep or the Hornburg. So
Okay.
Yeah.
But how does that? But that's after the siege of the Hornburg.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it just kind of changes it because it makes Wolf more like he was trying to rule, whereas in the movie, I guess we can start talking about Wolf.
Yeah.
So in the movie, Wolf is utterly consumed by revenge. And he is a great character because he starts off making good decisions, and then because of his hatred and his like single-mindedness, he does not care what price he has to pay to kill Helm's family. And well, not only to kill them, to make them suffer. And so him being, I mean, and also it makes sense in the I guess in the sense of the movie, like why is he at the Hornburg? Is because Edoras is a burnt husk because Hera burned it down. So like he doesn't really have a home in Edoras to go to. Mm-hmm. Whereas it sounds like in the appendix, like Edoras wasn't burned; it was just captured. So
Right.
there was probably some damage, but they probably could have still wintered there. So he probably was comfortable, in that place. So it was understandable. It also was just like him, all the underhanded tricks he was to make sure his men stayed in place. The stuff he used to convince the men when Helm was going out and, hunting all the lone people and killing them. Like the stuff he was using to make sure that, because he needed the men to get his revenge. And so, and the stuff like the lies he went through and everything else. And the fact of when his general buddy tells him, hey, you're going too far, you need to stop. He's like, well, now you're in my way, so I'll stab you in the gut. Yeah.
Okay, so he does eventually.
Oh yeah.
He does.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He kills
Gotcha.
him. He kills him off because the general's like, bro, this is not getting us anywhere. The siege is affecting them. Like our army we're as bad off as they are. You need to stop. And Wolf's like, I've not killed Hera yet, so you're dead. So like I do like him as like a villain where like he is utterly consumed by revenge, and his downfall is he cannot let go. He cannot forgive. He cannot relent. Everyone in Helm's family must suffer as much as he has had when his father died. And so that's what drives him. And so, yeah, he was a good villain. As I said, I think I would have liked. So, yeah, I think with him, like on his side, he was fine Tolkien character. Like I think he would actually probably work well if Tolkien wrote him this way. Like I definitely could see that because there's definitely stories of, I forget who's the one elf who betrays Gondolin, and like he betrays it because he gets so mad at them and he's like petty revenge, so he betrays them to Morgoth. But I forget the story. But that basically that's the story. Is like it was one elf who got so bitter and so angry that he led to the downfall of an entire nation.
Yeah, it was because there was an elf lady that he couldn't marry. Yeah.
So. But and there's probably other things too. But yeah, that was the main one that brought it. But like his bitterness led to the destruction of this, and it's like kind of similar with Wolf. His bitterness led to, well, not the destruction of Rohan because Rohan comes back, but leads to basically the destruction of the Dunlingdons, because after this they don't really show up until the Two Towers when they kind of like help Saruman. But like outside of this, they're off. They're off.
Right.
So.
Yeah. I think that, so the way that they changed Wolf's, like, kind of personality or character whenever his father died from, when Helm hit him.
Yeah.
I think that they did a pretty good job with that because it was compelling and it wasn't, like, I mean, of course, he had a reason to become angry. Because before that, he was very much like trying to sweet talk Hera and seemed to be like a kind guy. And then whenever he switches like that, I mean, even in like the instances where Hera's able to talk to him, she's still like saying like, "Oh, this is like this is not the boy I knew, when we were, growing up."
And it's true, he's changed.
Right. So I think they did that well and not, you know, in a sense, you know, it could have, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it was easy for them to really create him as a good villain
Mm-hmm.
because it gave him a reason to be really evil in a
Yes.
sense and nasty in the end. And I think just like looking at the movie with the idea of good versus evil
Mm-hmm.
and is there a clear distinction, I think is in a sense important
Mm-hmm.
with the way Tolkien wrote his stories.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think that there was a compelling good and evil side, I guess? in
Yeah,
the,
I would say
War of
so.
the
So the
Rohirrim?
one thing I will say that's good about Hera is, at the very least, so that at the end of the story, they have their duel. So Wolf and Hera have their duel, which I think it's like they agreed that whoever wins, basically, the army loses. Wolf loses, but then he backs off of his deal because obviously he's the villain. But like Hera, like, you know, she's seen Wolf has killed her brother in front of his eyes. Actually, both brothers, because he shot the older brother with the arrow and killed his younger brother, slit his throat right in front of him. So like she has a reason to hold a grudge against him. But she because she's good and she's not consumed by revenge like he is, she is willing to let him go. Like she defeats him and she's like, "All right, are you going to hold up to your end of the bargain? Because if you are, then we have no more conflict." Which I think is a good thing, because like that definitely wouldn't be something that, you know, you would write in Tolkien, of like somebody being like, you know, I'm the good guy. I will defeat the evil, but if I don't need to kill, I won't kill.
Interesting. Well, there's at least a difference being played up between
Yeah.
the two of them
Mm-hmm.
in that way, right? Kind of like, I mean, I guess you could almost argue like the difference between Frodo and Gollum,
Yes.
and I mean even and Bilbo as well. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they spared his life when they
Yeah.
could have killed it,
Mm-hmm.
but it was for the better in the end.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those are all the main characters. I don't know if we've got anyone. Trying to think if we've
Yeah.
missed anybody who else would be considered.
I mean, the
like a
Shield
main-
Maiden lady, she's a good tutor. She's just a good mentor for Hera. And she's just the good mentor character, you know, the old lady you don't think is that epic, and then you're just like, oh, she's done all of this. It's like, okay, that's cool. So like she's a good mentor character. Freyaloth, he's kind of a side character, ironically enough, but he's just a good, like, come in at the end and save the day kind of idea. And then there's not really that much more. I mean, I guess the Eagles, the Eagle comes and helps, but
Yeah, that was interesting with the Eagles, because yeah, there's it's like in another episode with Mark. I remember him talking about how, or I forget who it was even, but I thought it was Mark talking about how like the Eagles aren't just like something that you get to like come to your aid on a whim,
yeah.
you know, and like that's like one reason why people would say that it wouldn't work for the Eagles to help drop the ring, like take everybody to Mordor and drop the ring that way. So yeah, so I don't know how prevalent the Eagles would be just flying around so she could throw a big like, I don't know, drumstick of something
Yeah,
in the air.
big like deer haunch or something,
yeah.
whatever it was.
Yeah, so I mean, the fact that they had them in
Which
there,
I mean,
like-
that was another thing, is like, you know, the fact that she had a big thing of meat when apparently her people are starving. It's like, wait, where is this from? It's like,
but were they supposed to be starving at the beginning of the movie?
well, they mention at the beginning of the siege. They kind of mention it's like, we don't have a lot of food.
But I'm talking about the beginning of the movie, though. When
No,
she,
no. Oh no, well, in the beginning of the movie, yeah, that's a different story. Like, yeah, they have a lot of food then. But so when she goes, so in the siege, the Eagles are the ones who contact Freyaloth to get him to help out, to pull the air mirror as it was.
Right.
So that's how they contact him. But the yeah, I think she gives him something, or maybe she just asks. But yeah, like, you know, it is what it is. Like, obviously the Eagle saw that, you know, her request was valid and everything else. And the Eagle's probably seen the stuff that the Dumbledings were doing, and they're like, he was probably already like, these are not good people. They need to be dealt with. So,
yeah. Were there, so with characters who you think would be compelling in the story, or who you thought had a good story arc, would you say that they had an inner struggle for like doing the right thing?
So Hera kind of does at the end, where she's talking about her plan to confront Rolf, and then her mentor, Shield Maiden mentor, kind of pep talks her into it. So like, that's the only one. But once again, I wish they had done more of that, like during the siege section with her. Definitely Helm and Wolf. Like, Wolf has the inner struggle and he commits evil. Helm decides to kind of go off on his own and try to save his people that way, not try to lead as a proud leader anymore. So, yeah, so I would say of the three main characters, there's pretty good conflicts of the ones that are there for a long time. But yeah, so.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. But I think that kind of wraps it up.
Yeah, mostly. Yeah, as I said, so the thing I've learned when I was researching this movie, so the thing I was like realizing was, because Peter Jackson is making more movies, is apparently they needed to make this movie to keep the license for some legal stuff. So that's why it was animated. Like, one of the things I've noticed throughout the movies, like, there's a few animation scenes. Like, I'm no movie expert. It just seemed to me that was like really stiff, like stiff animation. Like, it was like, that is not a natural human action. How they're talking, and especially the battle scenes. Some of the battle scenes, I'm like, well, that's weird. But they were trying to make it on a budget. They were trying to save it.
Yeah.
I think they almost did. Like, they almost made it a not bad movie. I just wish Hera's story was slightly tweaked. Like, as I said, like, just give her more conflict in the siege, like internal struggle in the siege. And then I'll be like, okay, I actually understand her. Like, I connect with her more. Like, like, all the other characters, I felt like, I can see Tolkien writing this. I can see Tolkien writing this. I can see Tolkien writing this. I see Hera, I'm like, this is not a Tolkien character. So I'm like,
yeah. Okay.
It's like, yeah. So it's like, it was like, that was the thing. It was like, I think the first thing that stuck with me was, because they were trying to make it on a budget, obviously millions of dollars, you know, movies being what they are. They were trying to make it on a budget, so they weren't too fussed about quality. They didn't really advertise it, because once again, if you advertise, it takes a lot of your budget. And then what they were working with was almost good. And I was like, they just needed to add a little bit more to Hera's story, or change a little bit, because they had the time. Like, the section of the siege, it goes on for like, there's like 30 minutes of stuff.
Yeah.
Where it's just like them in the siege, talking about the siege and other stuff. Like, they easily could have had a few scenes of her struggling, trying to figure out how to manage a siege and not being able to move, and that kind of stuff. But they didn't want to, and it's like, well, you know, so it's up to you.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
so it's like, if I was rating this a movie, I would probably give it a out of 10. So like, 0 being never watched this is on the scale of worst movies ever, and 10 being the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, the original Peter Jackson trilogy. I would say this is a 5.
Interesting.
Because, like like I would personally say like The Hobbit probably also had like similar story flaws, like the Hobbit trilogy series, like it was bloated and everything else. But I never felt like the production quality was lacking. So like The Hobbit for me would be like a 6.5, or like
Okay.
depending on which trilogy. I'd have to rewatch them, rank them, which I don't want to rewatch those ones. But
Yeah.
because they had good production quality, because they cared about it and everything else, it was like that one. Whereas like this one, I noticed was like they are not animating this well.
So one thing about the animation
Yeah.
that did you ever watch the animated Hobbit and Lord of the Rings movies?
I have seen some clips. I've not seen everything.
Yeah. So there was something about this that reminded me of that. Is that some of the background shots of like the landscape almost looked like an actual like picture or shot of the landscape. Like whenever they showed the Hornburg for the first time, I'm like, that looks just like a shot from like the movie in the background. So what's interesting is that, especially at the Battle of Helm's Deep in the cartoon, it's the first movie of the Lord of the Rings. There's only two of them because they combine the Fellowship and the Two Towers into one movie.
Yeah.
So in there, they like actually have very dark looking orcs, but they look like actual people almost in like a dark, in just like dark armor or like a dark clothing or something like that. So there at times that's what I kind of felt like with the movie, is that I saw these animated people and some of like the surroundings and like the backgrounds, especially with like the landscape, seemed to look more real than they did animated.
Yeah.
But
So yeah, but yeah, once again, they were trying to make a movie on the cheap, so like because they had to. Yeah, that'll be an interesting topic whenever we get to whatever Peter Jackson's been cooking up.
yes, the Gollum movie, huh?
Yes.
The search for Gollum or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, but well, thanks Nathan for
Yes.
coming on and talking about
Yes.
the War of the Rohirrim. It's been good. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and catch us for our next episode coming out next week.
All right. Bye.
Thanks for visiting the White City. Before you leave, please subscribe to our podcast and check us out at thewhitecitypodcast.com. We're on YouTube or Facebook under the tag @The White City Podcast.